Hello everyone, and welcome to Digitalisation for Climate Neutrality, an Enlit Europe episode of our project series. My name is Areti Daradimu. I am the content director of Enlit Europe, and before I introduce the moderator of this episode to you, I would like to inform you that the episode will be available also on demand at the Enlit Europe website. Also, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentations. So if you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the box on the right-hand side of your screen. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Mark van Stiphout, Deputy Head of Unit Research and Innovation at DG Energy, European Commission, who is going to moderate this very interesting panel. Hi, Mark, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to leave you to it to introduce our guests and the episode, and I'll see you at the end for a wrap-up. Bye from me.
Right. Thank you, Areti, and welcome everybody to this panel of Enlit Europe that we're organizing together with the Bridge Initiative and the European Commission. So I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to a very interesting panel. My name is Mark van Stiphout. I am Deputy Head of Unit in DG Energy in the European Commission, and we are responsible for research, innovation, competitiveness, and digitalization. So a lot of things linked to what we are discussing here today. And of course, you know, there is a lot happening in Europe when it comes to energy policy, and the energy transition. So this will be a very, very interesting panel because we are going to talk about how digitalization can help climate neutrality and can help the energy transition. So I'm very happy to moderate this panel with such excellent speakers, namely Olivier Genest, André Gubina, Stanislas Dervemont, and Fernando Dominguez, who are all involved in the different working groups of Bridge. We're going to start with Olivier Genest. He is the chair of the Data Management Working Group, long-term involvement in Bridge and in many of the projects, lately in particular in the projects GIFT and Interconnect. So Olivier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everybody. So I'm indeed Olivier Genest. I'm from Trialogue, and I'm the chair of the Data Management Working Group. So if you go to the next slide. So this Data Management Working Group focuses on three main topics. The first one is related to the communication infrastructure. What are the technical solutions that we have, and what kind of infrastructure do we need to exchange data with a field device and involving TSO and DSO in particular. The second topic is related to cybersecurity and data privacy, because we are exchanging data with essential services operators, and also we need to make sure that the privacy is correct regarding, in particular, smart metering data. And third one is quite wide, which is data handling, which includes all the framework for data exchange and how several parties can exchange some data in an interoperable way, and also making sure that everybody gets the data he needs. So if you go to the next slide, we can see an overview of what was done in the previous year. So 2016 was the first year of this data management working group, and in fact, it was just a first set of recommendations. And next year, we focused on some specific topics. 5G technical requirement was related to how 5G could reply to the needs from smart grid, and also if specific needs should be replied to by other technologies. Also, we had a word on the characterization of flexibility services, how we can model these flexibility services, what are the kind of data that should be included. Then in 2018, we wanted to look at the third topic of data handling, and in which we looked at how we can store data, how we can access data, how to make them interoperable and secured. Then in 2019, we really wanted to focus on two specific topics. In fact, at that time, we had the European Commission recommendation for cybersecurity in the energy sector, and European Commission was willing to get the feedback from a research and innovation project. And so we had a quite large consultation to see what was the feedback and also to prepare the ground for future cybersecurity certification. Also, we started the work on TSO-DSO cooperation, which is an important topic when we look at flexibility and future smart grid. and also how it can come up to the consumer. And in fact, the work we did in 2020 was a kind of continuation of this TSO-DSO cooperation topic, because when we look at this kind of data action, we need to consider the use cases from the project. And so we worked on developing a repository to host all of them and give a aggregated view of what is done in this Horizon 2020 project. Also, we worked on the EU data action reference architecture that not only covers the energy sector, but also the link with other sectors, and so cross-sector data exchange and also cross-borders. And the third topic was focusing on the interoperability of flexibility assets. I mean, what kind of flexibility assets are used in several projects and how they can be controlled, and how to make sure that the way flexibility will be done in several projects is compatible and in the future will be interoperable. So we built, if you go to the next slide, the activities for this year following this last year action. In fact, as you see, 3 of the action are in fact similar to what we did last year, but we want to go one step further to enhance this reuse case repository and cover not only use case, but also roles and possibly extension of existing standard like SIM profile, something like this. Also, we want to move forward this EU data action reference architecture by demonstrating how it can work and implementing a MVP, minimum viable product, in several projects. Also, we want to continue the work on interoperable flexibility asset. Last year, we included only 4 projects, but now we want to look at several tens of them based on the about 50 or 60 projects we have currently in Bridge. And the last one, which is new, is related to the fact that in Bridge, we have a lot of very interesting knowledge and experience, and it could be beneficial to push this to standardization and also to see how we can benefit from standardization and get also an interesting view on what is being developed. So that's it for me. It gives an overview of what we have done and we are doing now. And I will pass the floor to Andrei.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Olivier. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrei Gubina. I come from University of Ljubljana from Slovenia, where I'm associate professor. I'm head of the Laboratory of Energy Policy, and I'm also the chairman of the Business Models Working Group. So next slide, please. Today, I would like to tell you something about the exciting world of business models and the working group that we're restarting after a hiatus of a couple of years. And this is why in the general session or general meeting of the Bridge, there was a sense that there's one cog missing, and we are providing this cog to help tackle the demand response aggregation and the business models that are associated with this, to help establish the local energy markets, to focus on services that would support the sector integration, especially when there are various vectors coming together at the marketplace, and when we have multi-vector so markets, and then we have single vector energy vector coming through different markets. Then how to remunerate flexibility that is really, really needed in addition to storage to support integration of renewables, and then how to engage the prosumers and consumers into self-supply through tariff schemes. Next slide, please. So we are as a working group here to provide reliable and unbiased information to the European Commission, with the information coming from the projects that take place in Bridge. And so in this working group, we work on business model aspects, and we are here to provide this robust operating structure so that we know what we're doing and we can reproduce the reliable results. Next slide, please. So the topics that we aim to focus on in the first year, there's one topic, and it's about, we want to look at use cases. You've heard a lot about use cases, and how can we connect them to the cross-domain business models. So how can business models that describe the services then connect different actors and then it's easy to put it in one spreadsheet, but then how does this play in practice? And these are then the use cases. So we will focus on these three tasks. One is, first we will define the methodology, how to capture, how to describe this as a paradigm. So the use cases, the business model, services, actors, how we put all this together. And then we want to identify the best practice in various projects that we have. So we look at the different key performance indicators. How do we measure this? And then also then we want to highlight then the concrete results in task 3 coming from the projects, and look what went wrong and what were the success stories in the projects. Then in the next year, we will then expand, because we will already establish a good working conditions, to 2 topics. So we will look at the tools, how this benefit of business models and services described by them can be evaluated, and we will look at the business models that will here look at the data value chain observability. So what do data tell us? Which data do we need? At what resolution? How to go into this? And here digitalization is coming into place, because we come from top down, but now we start looking under the hood. How does this work? So next slide. I think this is all from me. And now I would like to introduce my next speaker, which is Stan Derberman, please. I'm sorry, Fernando Dominguez. Please, Fernando, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, it's Fernando Dominguez. I'm from Vito in Energyville. And basically, I will be representing today the working group on regulation. Okay, we go to the next slide. In this group, the big overarching topic is integration, and how do we make sure that the different pieces of regulation that affect the sector are properly coordinated to facilitate the development of a more integrated system. That is what is needed. To do that, the objective for 2021 are organized in 4 big categories. The first one is the harmonizations of products and services, with the idea that by having more products and services that are more similar will facilitate the conversations between the different actors in the sector, being TSOs, DSOs, but also providers of flexibility. The second one is the cooperation between cross-border and regional cooperation, with the idea that we can have a more integrated system when it comes to the different regions in Europe. The third one is the integration between the different bits or the different ways of dealing with flexibility. In here, we have both market-based solutions, but also market situations that are not market-based. Since both of them are kind of dealing with the same pool of flexibility, it is important that those 2 pieces of legislations are internally consistent, and therefore that regulation needs to be considered as part of REACH. And the last one is the coordination between flexibility markets. Since we are moving more towards situations where there are more local markets, local communities dealing with flexibility, it is important that those communities are also integrated as part of a bigger picture, which is the coordination with the intraday and the overall market system. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. To deal with those 4 tracks, as part of this work package, we have divided the analysis into 5 different actions. In there, what we have done is we ran a survey And with the results of those survey, we kind of group it into we run the survey between the different projects in Bridge, and with the input in there, we identify the 5 groups. For each one of those actions, there is one main topic, and then there are some subtopics that are also related. The first one of those actions is related with product standardization, in the sense that we have to move towards more similar products. And in here, there is also a particular focus on congestion and voltage control, once that other products like frequency control have been standardized for some time. The second action is service provision by energy communities. In here, what we are trying to do is to see what is the services that those local communities can provide and how they are going to be integrated into the system. Then in action 3, we are going towards system security. And in here, system security is understood in quite a broad way. It is both cybersecurity, but also security of supply and other forms of security and reliability in the system. And to do that, we are considering, in addition to cybersecurity, things like integration between regions to facilitate the transfer of energy, and also network planning. The 4th action is the link between different flexibility mechanisms. As I was saying before, some of these mechanisms are based on a market, some are not based on a market, and it will be crucial that all those mechanisms are internally consistent, and we are trying to obtain a well-integrated system. And the last action is action 5. And in here is around local markets, which obviously, as you can see, some of these actions are interrelated. It's not that we are consider them kind of in isolation. We need to consider them also in an integrated way. And in here, these local markets include things like peer-to-peer markets, but also multi-carrier markets, as well as considerations on local communities. Then that is the work plan for 2021 in this working group. And now we actually pass it to Stanislas for him to present.
Here we go. Hello. Thank you very much, Fernando. Then my name is Stanislas Damou. I work with the team at RESCOP EU, the Federation of Renewable Energy Cooperatives, and I'm also chairing the working group on consumer and citizen engagement. My role today will be to present to you the work that the working group has been performing in the past year and the plan that we have for 2021, just like my colleagues. And I'd like to highlight also the links that we have with the other working groups and how we work together, how we collaborate together. Maybe we can go on to the next slide. Yes.
Can you turn on your camera or your light?
Apologies. Here we go.
Great.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you. Fantastic. So like I was saying, the objectives of our working group are very simple. We are looking at consumer engagement, specifically consumer to citizen engagement, meaning how do we actually activate consumers into the energy market. One thing that we decided to focus on is specifically collective action, and collective action through research and innovation projects, as it was one of the main conclusions from our group in the year 2018-2019, to realize that in order to get sustainable engagement from consumers, we needed to create collective structures that allowed for a bottom-up approach. This is specifically what we focused on, and this is the vision for our working group. We broke that down into 4 main objectives, which is 1, understanding the cultural, geographical, and social factors that are actually driving engagement, and how can we segment different groups of consumers in order to understand them better. Then how do we profile also consumers and making sure to understand better the drivers behind their engagement, and how can we build our strategies related to that? How do we assess the effectiveness of our engagement strategies, and specifically what kind of activities we can optimize for in order to build better engagement strategies for research innovation projects, but also in general for our organizations, always focusing on that bottom-up approach. And then finally, we looked at how to design regulatory innovation in order to empower consumers and making sure that those bottom-up organizations are actually emerging in the European energy markets. In that sense, we are very much related to the regulation working group, but also in the business model working group in terms of how to make those structures emerge, but we take a little bit of a different point of view, looking at more the consumer approach, the bottom-up approach, when our colleagues are looking at the top-down perspective. And so therefore, we can really enrich the different views by collaboration on that. Maybe we can go to the next slide. In terms of the work that we have been doing in the past 5 years since the creation of the working group, the report in 2020 really built on the work that was done in 18 and 19 in terms of really understanding the role of collective action in engaging consumers. And so therefore, we kind of worked on what are the different components of the engagement strategies and the engagement in general in terms of research innovation. And there, we published a report that really looked at different pieces of that aspect. First, we of course focused on COVID-proof engagement strategy because it was 2020 and the impact that we saw at the time. That report also took a look at engagement strategies in current research innovation projects and really how could we tweak them in order to make them more efficient. And there we really understood that it is a need for a formal engagement strategy, both at research innovation level, but also at capacity building level, and that we really need to build on existing community initiative. We built a governance guide for energy communities, which we see as the final version of this collective action schemes from consumers, this bottom-up organization that we're trying to reach for. And so therefore, it's really important in terms of the conclusion that we reached to see that it was important to create organizational structures. So really formal structures that would then support those bottom-up initiatives to actually take place in the market. It was also important for us to highlight the adapted procedures that were needed for those community initiatives. And so therefore, we looked at as well what type of indicators we could look at in terms of assessing the development of community initiatives. And so there we really took the point of view of the stages of change, which is a framework of social science and humanities that help us understand the different steps of development of a group. And there we see that it's important to really rethink the way we think about engagement in terms of really fitting into those different stages and adapting the criteria of assessment based on the type of initiatives we're looking at. And then finally, we created also a repository of smart tools that are developed currently by research and innovation projects, and really looking at not only the type of tools, but also the type of user profiles that they are targeting, and also the stages of change in terms of the collective aspects. And there we realized that there is a mismatch in terms of the type of tools that we have been developing, and we really encourage our colleagues to refocus the tool development towards more people-centric versus technology-centric. And we also try to, in general, refocus towards value added of community initiative versus market focus that has been the traditional approach of bridge projects. So therefore, the feedback from my colleagues was very positive. They actually asked us to, pursue those conclusions further. And so in 2021, this is exactly what we're gonna try to uncover more and support our colleagues in the Bridge Initiative even more. Maybe we can go to the next slide. In terms of the structure of the work and therefore the objectives as well that we're going to try to reach, I'm not alone. We are working as a leadership team in 4 different subgroups that are going to take on one piece of the puzzle of consumer engagement, citizen activation, as we call it. And so the first one is driver and indicators of engagement. That is led by Johanna. And specifically what they're going to look at is really improving on the indicator framework, really understanding the link between drivers, economical, social framework, and geographical aspects into the indicators that we're using to actually assess citizen initiatives, citizen-led initiatives. The second one is the strategy of engagement led by Panayotis from the project Telos. And Panayotis group is really going to focus on creating adapted strategies based on, one, the stages of change, but also two, the different type of user profiles and the different approaches that we want to actually build. The governance models for collective action group is led by Josh Roberts from the Compa project, and is going to really look at the structures and market integration of those collective organizations. So they're continuing on to the work on energy communities and really focusing on the links between market value and community value and how those two can be linked together. And then finally, the Smart Tools for Engagement group, which is led by Diego Mancilia of the Parity project, is going to look at enhancing that list of smart tools, but also looking at how can we diversify the user profiles that are existing today in the broader usage innovation base. I think that is it for me. I will now pass it back on to you, Mark, for the debates.
Great. Thank you very much, Stanislas and Fernando and Andre and Olivier. So if you can all turn on your camera again, then we can start the panel discussion. And I would also like to invite the audience to put their questions in the chat, because of course we have thought of some questions to kick off the debate. And we have shared these questions with each other. So the, let's say, predictable part of the discussion will happen if I ask the questions based on what we discussed. But I think it is more fun if we see questions also from the audience, because that will bring in new perspectives and things that we may not have thought of yet. Is everybody here? Yeah, Stanislas, great. So thank you all for your presentations. I think you gave a very nice insight into what the different working groups of Bridge are doing. And of course, Stanislas, as you mentioned, we have, we're 5 of us together here, but we should not forget that there are many, many people involved in Bridge from many projects. And so this is also, a recognition to the good work of all of them. And the, as you know, the aim of Bridge is to help all the individual projects that are part of Bridge make more impact or have more impact. And one way is, of course, exchange between the projects, and another one is exchange between the projects and the policy, to be able to make sure that the policy also responds to the innovations, and that can then help you again to scale up, to roll out the innovations that come out of the projects. And so today we're discussing what is happening in terms of in these projects and the link to digitalization, because we're preparing a digitalization of energy action plan for next year. And so this is a very topical theme to see what is happening in Bridge and in the projects, and see how we can help with an action plan to roll out all these innovations. And most of you have been involved already for quite some time in Bridge. And so maybe first a bit of a question of looking back. I would like to ask you if you can share with us a bit how you have seen the way projects deal with digitalization in Bridge evolve. And so what is how has this happened over the past year, so to say, or what has changed? And maybe also if you have an example of the most interesting innovation in digital that you've come across in your working group, I think that would be very interesting to share. So maybe we go in reverse order. So then Stanislas, you can go first.
Thank you, Mark. I think in terms of the digitalization strategy from the point of view of consumer engagement, really, it has been quite the revolution in research innovation project in terms of understanding that consumer engagement has a clear role to play in the deployment of smart tools, in terms of the deployment of digital technologies, and in general to create that link to the consumer. So I think it was very much a system perspective before, and now we are moving on more and more to a consumer-centric perspective. So I see that as a very positive point in terms of the work of our working group. And we received a lot of also questions based on that, which is how exactly do you do that? And there, the Bridge initiative is seen really as a resource in terms of helping projects understand better how to create that link. If I had to pick one, obviously it's unfair because I'm part of a project myself, and I am very attached to the tools that we are developing in the Compa project. But I think the specifically the Compilot is something that is very interesting in terms of creating a tool that is really community focused, and so really that is going to change as we are actually maturing as an organization. And so we really focused on that with the Compa project, and we see a lot of projects now having that focus of creating tools that are not standalone, that are not only one piece fits all, but rather that are changing as the initiatives are changing and really adapting to the needs of consumers and citizens. And that's really something that I feel is very positive in terms of the changes that are happening in research innovation trends.
Okay, thanks. Fernando?
Okay, I think that from the point of view of regulation, digitalization has actually triggered a lot of new ideas, new possibilities, and obviously that has been evolving over time as what we understand as digitalization becomes more obvious, but also at the beginning there are a lot of theoretical ideas on how things could be evolving, what kind of tools could be put in practice. But over time, what you observe is that as the demos start showing more specific results, then is when we see that the need of regulation focus much more on specific areas than others. And in that respect, it's quite a big change what digitalization has brought into the whole regulatory work, because otherwise we will have stayed with the old regulation and we will not need anything new in that area. In terms of big changes, I think that I am a bit in line with what Stanislas was saying. Okay, one project that has been interesting, and again, I'm biased because I'm involved on it, is OneNet. Because at the beginning, you start with this idea of you need one single system that will actually perfectly coordinate the whole system. And as time evolved, you realize that actually much more of a system of systems is going to be the norm if we want to introduce consumers in a much more dynamic way, but at the same way we want to coordinate TSOs and DSOs. You don't want to have a system that serves for everyone, but you just focus much more on the coordination of the different systems in place.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Andre, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm an electrical engineer. So as such, but I was trained as a control engineer. So we're trying to see how so I'm conditioned to see every power system, to control it and to identify what is going on in it. And of course, we used to do this top down. So from the control center, tell everyone, and this is the system of systems, so we do the command and control. But now we have the consumers that we need to activate, and and we cannot just tell them now you do this and you do that because of democracy and these other things. So we need to find a way how to engage them and show them the benefits for this, and the business models and the services. So the business models are the underlying fabric of services that we want to bring to them and show them on the menu. This is how you could do it, and please get involved if you see fit. Otherwise, we'll find something else for you. And I think the mentality, so the digitalization is actually enabling all this. So we now are looking at the data and finding big holes and finding black spots, and so for example, we all talk top level, the big so ideas how to do strategic, which is important, of course, but once you go down to local, the data may not be there. This is very, very important. We need this to do in the front ranks to actually do something. So I think all the initiatives about open data pilot that projects were part of, and now now this open science, so that the data have to be in some repositories. This was a revolutionary idea we did in a story project that started in 2015. We had all the data for the whole project from various countries, all pilots, brought to one place by one partner, and then we could look at the data and get information out of it and compare it time-wise, pilot-wise. But this is now standard practice. So we're going beyond this. So use the data to describe our business models and actually qualify why some use case is better than other and why some business models may not work, because we're so much closer to reality with the measurements, with the data that we get. So digitalization is actually, and I'm not even talking about the smart contracts and blockchain and all this. This is then the next stage. So this is really, really a breakthrough and a different step next. So it's really, really helping us. And I see the transformation in front of my eyes. So this digitalization as a digital transformation, it's putting us in the overdrive.
Great, thanks, Andre. But so what is then the? I'm still going pushing you a bit for. Let's say, can you give us one example of, you know, the most interesting or one of the very interesting innovations in relation to digitalization that you've come across?
Indeed. So that's what I was building towards. So, for example, in distribution grid, everybody is talking about, yes, we have the advanced distribution grid monitoring system, ADMS, no problem. So we cover the data, and then we know this. We have smart meters, so smart metering infrastructure. But then again, smart meters, this is just observation. You get information about what is there, but how to control it, how to get have this estimation based on market signals. This is something that in the XFlex project, we're developing the market flex as a tool that is actually going to help, or is going to go step beyond the state estimation on distribution level. And this is something that's really, really exciting, because it's something that we see it's missing in the ADMS systems being deployed currently. And it's something that's really, really needed, because it's not just getting information. Because what do you do then with this information? You know it's observability, but you want controllability. And this is then the next step, which is something that's like what Stan said. Well, I'm a bit partial about the things that we do in our project, but then again, it is the vehicle with which the consumers, the prosumers, and businesses can get a grip on what to do technically, physically in the system themselves, and then make money through business models. So
okay.
I like this combines engineering and then also the market view together.
Yeah. Basically, like, you know, controllability at a higher level to give freedom at a lower level for consumers to do all kind of weird things based on the tools that Stanislas and his group are developing. No, that's a bit what we're going to. Great. But then, Olivier, the question to you also. From the data management working group, how do we make sure that all this data actually reaches the people that can do something intelligent with it? No, that's a bit what you are worried about, so to say.
Yeah, so indeed, in fact, the digitalization is really the heart of what we've been doing in data management working group. And but it has evolved over time. What we can see from the past report that I mentioned earlier is that we were initially looking at a small scope, like looking at one specific interface or one specific issue, and only focusing on the energy sector. And what we see now is that the overall maturity has increased, and now we are going to more wide topics, and also looking not only the energy sector, but also a cross-sector data exchange or cross-sector services. And this is very interesting, because then we can also benefit from other sectors and see if we are aligned, and we need to to build something that will allow to connect this sector, and so they can collaborate and finally provide interesting services for the users. And it is one good example for this is what is done in Interconnect project, where there is a semantic interoperability layer that is developed. And so it is a quite complicated name, but the idea behind that it is a layer that helps to bridge the smart home, the smart building, the smart grid, and possibly the transportation sectors. And based on common ontologies such as SAREF, which has been mentioned in several discussions. So this allows to put together people from the smart home or from building management or white good manufacturers, also grid operators or energy services companies, and they need to build a common ground that they will use so they can provide, I would say, cross-sector services to the users.
Great, great. Thank you. That's very good. And yeah, I mean, I think you can also see how the different things that you're all working on really connect to each other, and you know, one thing enables the other, so to say. I also noticed that we don't have any questions from the audience yet. That is not good. So we're going to raise the stakes. I think I would again like to invite you to come up with questions, and we will award the best question that comes in the chat today with a special treatment and a guest of honor for the next Bridge General Assembly. So the game is open. Until then, we're just going to continue with some of the questions that we thought of we would like to discuss among each other. So then I have a question. Basically, now I would like to start again with you, Olivier, because of course, you know, digitalization in the energy sector is not in isolation, so to say. We're using many of the digital tools, I think, that have been tested elsewhere. The discussion of data exchange also happens in other sectors. What do you think we can learn from other sectors? Do you know something, you know, from your point of view? Is there something you can share, you know, from your experience, where you think we can learn something?
Yeah, for sure. So between different sectors, the common good is very often IoT, Internet of Things, and edge technologies. And in fact, this is pretty much interesting because currently we have several European projects, research and innovation projects, related to what we call IoT large-scale pilots. So in this kind of project, we are trying to demonstrate with pilots how we can use this IoT technology for several purposes. In fact, we have 4 verticals. One of them is energy, of course, but we also have manufacturing, healthcare, and agriculture. And so we have currently a project called OpenDI that connects all these sectors together. And so we have some working groups, and we are trying together to build some common results and see how we can learn from other sectors, and also how we can have kind of fertilization between the sectors, so we build something that will be in line with all kind of activities.
But so what sectors in this OpenDI are most interesting, or you know, where are they more advanced, where we can learn something?
So for sure, it depends on the topic, but if we look at like data privacy, of course, healthcare is quite in advance because we know that there are very strict requirements there. Also, when we look at agriculture, in fact, I would say farming 2.0, I mean, the way we can use IoT technologies for farming is also something that provide like a lot of sensors and connected networks. So there's a lot to learn here. And also, of course, in manufacturing, we know with Industry 4.0 that we have several devices. And what's interesting in manufacturing is that also energy efficiency is at stake. And so it means that we have some close connection between the energy sector, and also we know that manufacturing can provide flexibility to the energy sector. So here we have also a real connection from a services perspective.
Okay, great. Good. Maybe Stanislas, do you have a view on that as well? Let's say from the consumer angle, do you have a view on what sectors we can learn something from?
Sure. I think there is something to be learned about crisis management, specifically in the water management sector. I think the way we deal with water as a common, and the way therefore we have to rely on data from the public is something that is extremely important and is really a best practice in terms of what we should probably be thriving for in terms of the energy sector. I see as well something that is maybe an inherent tension in the energy sector that does not exist in other sectors, which is this aspect of privacy and this aspect of protection that Olivier already mentioned with the healthcare sector. I definitely think that this is something that we can learn from in terms of managing this privacy and making sure that we provide choices. I think, however, we have been better than the healthcare sector in terms of providing control to the final user in terms of where the data is provided and how it's provided and how it's transferred. And that's something really that if we do a good job of at the same time providing for a high level of privacy while remaining or keeping the control in the hands of really the data owner, which is the consumer, then really I think we will have successfully done the digitalization of the energy sector. How this is going to happen and how really we can provide that's a big question. Personally, my opinion is that it will go through governance. It will go through collective organizations that will allow for consumers to perceive better the challenges and speak in one voice in order to lower the complexity also of that management of data, while at the same time keeping this democratic aspect that Andrei mentioned a little bit earlier today. And so it is really a challenge, and I feel like we are learning as we go, but it is definitely something that I see very positive.
Great, thanks. So now we have questions in the chat. So linking to this control, there is a question about cybersecurity and how do we protect our data. I think the obvious question, we can talk about digitalization all we like. If we have a few blackouts because of cybersecurity leaks, then a lot of the, let's say, positive approach towards digitalization as an enabler may very soon turn around. So how do we protect the data? I think, André, maybe this is a good question for you.
Yeah, see, the cybersecurity in the event, in the era where everything is a computer and connected, and everything is actually hackable. So it's just a question of what is the priority. Is it worthwhile hacking? It's a very important issue. So looking at how do we protect our data? So this is the first thing that we need to learn we need to do in our project is to prepare a data management strategy, how we're going to anonymize, how we're going to store, and how we're going to disaggregate the data so that whenever they are stored somewhere, they cannot be traced back to users. We have so the projects themselves, as mandated by European Commission, we need to really show that that we have data owners and then data controllers, which are separate entities, and then data processors. So all this procedure, I think, brings a lot of awareness for the partners in the project that this is how. So it's an important issue and how this is done. But if we're talking about in general, you're right. It comes mundanely to the topic of taking care of the passwords, taking care of the installations of our personal computers, because especially during the pandemics, a lot of work was done from homes, and this then comes to really the basic data cybersecurity hygiene on personal level. So this is something that we can do something, and this is actually the best thing that we can do. But at the same time, that we keep this also in our organizations, this level of conscious.
André, do you mind if we go to the next question?
Please go ahead.
because I think this gives an insight. I think it's also it's a matter of a continuous effort. It's you're never done with cybersecurity in a way, but it starts indeed with a clear strategy within each company how to, as you say, anonymize, aggregate, disaggregate when you start storing it. Because we have some other questions, and this one actually I would like to ask Olivier. Do you think network operators, and here it's said notably TSOs, but I would think TSOs and DSOs, have adequate analytical capability to address the challenges of digitalization? And is there a real commitment on the part of regulators and decision makers to support this need? Because the person who asked the question says that he or she has some doubts. Now, that's fine, but let's see if we can take those doubts away. Olivier, what do you think?
So regarding the first question regarding adequate analytical capability. So in fact, in one of the report of Bridge, we really asked to the project, I mean, and in particular DSO and TSO, do they have qualified people that can take care of this digitalization or interoperability or security issue? And in fact, what we learned was interesting, because if we look at the scope of the project, it is quite easy because we have consortiums, including some research or some expertise companies that will provide all what we need so we can build this pilot. But when we go to industrialization, then we have an issue, because this kind of topic is not in the heart of what is the business of a DSO or a TSO, who is pretty much oriented to electrical engineering and managing the network. And so here we have something that we need to look at, and it was identified for cybersecurity in particular, that first we need to train all the people of DSO and TSO so they are aware of what digitalization means and what could be the impact. And also we need to see how we can make sure that we have qualified people, qualified engineers that can then join this domain and contribute with both this ICT or data management or data analytics perspective, and also a view of what is a grid operator business. Thanks. So that's my question to the first part. So maybe regarding the regulator, maybe a regulation working group would provide a better view than me.
Yeah, good point. Fernando, do you have a view on the commitment of, let's say, the regulators or the policy makers to help the network operators to be up to what is required from them?
I think that in there, the whole Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe actually are a way for TSOs and DSOs to actually get these capabilities a step further than where they have them at this moment. Also, yes, it is something that it will require some time, and yes, regulators are trying to make sure that TSOs and DSOs have the funds to actually invest in these new technologies and test new technologies, and to a certain extent to support them on that development. Okay, in many cases you find that it's the regulator actually the one developing some new techniques or new approaches in that respect, in coordination with the different TSOs and DSOs. Then I think that there is a good commitment in there. Is that it's not always easy to promote the change in companies that for a long time have been doing things in a specific way. But both regulators and companies have embraced this, and they're basically providing the necessary tools.
Okay. All right. Maybe one last question, and here I'm going to ask you to be very quick. And this is actually I'm going to try to combine two questions. One is the challenges in relation to regional digital standards, and on the other hand, the limits of digitalization. So can you maybe mention an example of something that digitalization will not solve? And then I would really ask you to be very short, like a few, 30 seconds, because then we're going to conclude. So here, Andre, maybe I start with you.
Sorry, Mark, could you please repeat the question? I've lost the one part of it.
Okay, so what are the challenges is coming up with regional digital standards, and what are the limits of digitalization? So maybe you can mention one example of something that digitalization will not solve. What are the limits of digital, so to say?
I mean, the limits are, again, where we come to the physical point of view, physical point of activation. So digitalization is all fine, but when you have to charge your car, you need to transfer energy to your electric car. You need to power your washing machine, and you need to heat your home, and you need to communicate. So digitalization can only go so far. At one point, it needs to meet the physical reality, and we need to be prepared for this.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Stanislas?
I think on my end, and I won't speak of the regional standards because I'm not really an expert, but I think digitalization stops where governance begins. It's difficult to draw the line sometimes, but I think it's important to, like Andrei said, keep this idea that at the end of the day, the physical persons make the decisions. And so therefore governance is crucial in terms of making those choices. Where do we digitalize? How do we digitalize? For what purpose? And so really, I think that's where it's not a limit, but it's more a, let's say, a boundary of digitalization to make sure that the governance system around it, and specifically the collective governance schemes, are clear and they are in place in order to welcome this innovation.
Okay, thank you. Fernando?
Okay, in terms of how do you do the local regulation, at the end of the day, it's a matter of balancing the fact there is a point in which you don't want to standardize the regulation anymore. You want to recognize that there are going to be differences, and that is the core thing in regulation, to identify in what areas you have to have the flexibility to recognize that there are regional differences, okay, and to identify those regional differences.
Great.
As for the,
I'm going to stop you there because otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Okay.
Sorry about that. And I think I need to wrap up, Olivier. I'm sorry about that. I hope you don't mind.
Okay.
So I'm going to quickly conclude because we still have 1 minute left. I want to thank you all for this discussion. I want to thank the audience. We're going to pick one question. I hope you have mentioned who you are so we can invite you as the guest of honor to the next Bridge General Assembly. We are working on a digitalization of energy action plan. All the things we discussed here today will be very important, and the input from Bridge will be enormously important, both in the action plan, in the legislative work that's happening at the moment when it comes to data management, when it comes to flexibility markets. There's a lot happening in our DG or in the European Commission at the moment in how to shape these markets. Digitalization is a big driver, and we're really looking at the input from Bridge, from the different working groups, to provide us with the evidence, the examples to make this happen. So that's very important. We're supporting Bridge further through Horizon Europe. We're continuously looking at how to improve it, how to shape it better. So in Horizon Europe, you'll find plenty of references to the work of Bridge and also support for it. So please have a look at that so that you will make the life of our evaluators very difficult when it comes to selecting the best projects. But I hope to stay in touch with all of you. And now it's over to you, Areti.
Thank you very much to Mark and all the participants of this episode. I would like to remind everybody that if you wish to watch the episode again or recommend it to your friends and colleagues, you can find the link at the on-demand page of Enlit Europe. Also, we are planning to write an article on this episode for Smart Energy International, where Olivier's final statement will also be part of. So thank you again for joining us all, and until next time, have fun and stay safe.